Welcome into OutKick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Mondays after a nice, hopefully somewhat long weekend. I felt like it was long because all I did was watch the College World Series and hang out in front of my television. We got a bunch to dive into early today. A little bit of a housekeeping. I'm taking my son, my oldest, to go visit some colleges. So I'll be completely off the air tomorrow, touring colleges with him, and then not on Wednesday for OutKick the show. Back Thursday and Friday when I get back home into the Nashville area. So a little bit of housekeeping, but show today, show Thursday, show Friday this week. We're going to talk all about the Caitlin Clark absurdity of her being left off the U.S. women's team, why I think it's just an abject failure of basic management skills. College World Series nearly set. We've got Georgia, NC State later today to figure out the 8th member of the College World Series. But I have been loving the drama, following these games like crazy. I love this time of year when it comes to the College World Series. I think baseball, probably the most underrated, college baseball, most underrated sport in America. By the way, women's college softball, also underrated. I know a lot of you love that. Both of those sports, I think, could be way bigger than they are. The Celtics taking a 2-0 lead in the series NBA Finals against the Dallas Mavericks. Trump has exploded as a big favorite, as there has been virtually no impact from the 34 felony convictions in New York City. We will discuss that. And no one's above the law except everybody who showed up in Washington, D.C. and protested against Israel on the same weekend where 4 hostages were freed after 8 months in captivity. Reminder, 5 American hostages are still missing. You hear that almost nowhere. We're going to dive into all of that. But in the meantime, Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. You could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. NBA Finals mean more on Prize Picks. So do the star players. Boosted payouts, select basketball stars you won't find anywhere else. When the NBA Finals are over, the action doesn't stop. You can bet on the WNBA, Caitlin Clark, superstar Angel Reese, or you could try out esports every Wednesday and Saturday in June. If your lineup doesn't win, you get the entire entry fee back. That's Counter-Strike 2, Call of Duty, League of Legends, many more. Prize Picks also offers injury insurance, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured this playoff basketball season. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half, doesn't return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back, not count it as a loss. Download the app today. Use code OutKick for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code OutKick, first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Speaking of picking more, picking less, it's that easy. Not putting Caitlin Clark on the U.S. women's basketball team is one of the biggest failures of basic business that I can remember ever seeing in the modern world of sports. You can go back on my Twitter feed. Months ago, I said putting Caitlin Clark on the women's basketball team, sending her over to Paris, was a no-brainer, and there was no way U.S. women's basketball could screw this up. Guess what happened? They screwed it up. This is yet another example of the WNBA not being ready for prime time. They have begged for 3 decades for people to care about women's basketball. Over the weekend, Caitlin Clark sold out Washington, D.C.'s arena. Over 20,000 people showed up to watch her team, the Indiana Fever, who were like 2-9, play against a winless Washington WNBA franchise. Usually the Washington WNBA franchise plays in an arena with only 4,500 seats. Because Caitlin Clark was coming to D.C., they sold out what is usually, I believe, the Wizards Arena where the Washington Capitals play. I've been and watched games there. Over 20,000 seats. They're all showing up for Caitlin Clark. I shared you the data on WNBA viewership. It all is coming basically from Caitlin Clark. Given the incredible opportunity to put women's basketball on a huge stage, maybe make the women's basketball team even more interesting potentially than the men's basketball team this year in Paris, it was a no-brainer, basic business for Caitlin Clark to be on the team. Women's basketball dropped the ball and failed epically not putting her on this team. Now, let me go ahead and address a couple of comments I've seen. She's not one of the 12 best basketball players. So what? Tiger Woods isn't one of the 12 best golfers right now. If you had the opportunity to stage a golf tournament and you could draft 12 golfers to show up for that golf tournament, you would put Tiger Woods in it. Do you know why? Because he's a big draw. Do you know what Liv did? I'm playing in the Liv golf tournament here in a little bit. Do you know they tried to go get Tiger Woods? They couldn't. They paid Phil Mickelson a huge sum of money. Phil Mickelson, at that point in time, is not one of the 10 or 12 best golfers in terms of actual ability, but he is one of the biggest and best draws. Netflix is about to have Mike Tyson fight, theoretically, against Jake Paul. Neither one of those guys are the two best boxers in their respective weight classes. They're doing it because people care. Conor McGregor keeps fighting. People care about Conor McGregor. I'm telling you right now, as someone who has run a business, the failure to put Caitlin Clark here is just staggering to me. She is by far the most interesting person who is playing women's basketball. She would triple the overall ratings for these games by herself, and due to her popularity, she would make others popular who were playing alongside of her. This, again, with the WNBA and women's basketball begging for attention for decades, they have gotten an opportunity the likes of which we haven't seen. Caitlin Clark is a comet streaking across the night sky. She is an opportunity for everyone to look up and pay attention to what is going on. And instead of embracing her star power, you know what they've done? They have decided they would rather be a tiny league that is getting a fraction of the attention it otherwise should be. I've been on this for a long time. Caitlin Clark is a rising tide that lifts all boats. She's Tiger Woods. She is Ronda Rousey. She is the best thing that's ever happened to women's basketball. She makes people who otherwise wouldn't care, just like Tiger did, care. She makes people who otherwise wouldn't be watching UFC women's fighting, like Ronda Rousey did, care. And we don't know how long this star power is going to last. So when people say, oh, well, she can play in 2028, maybe she'll still be a big star then. Maybe she'll tear 2 ACLs and never be able to play at the level she does right now. I mean, I hope it's not going to happen, but would that stagger anyone? That happens all the time in athletics. People who show a great deal of early promise have issues and aren't able to ever live up to that promise. So when I see things like this, it makes me think so many of these sports leagues need a director of basic fan common sense. Because I've been going off on this a lot over streaming and how difficult it's getting to be able to watch the games that you want to see played. Their inability to handle basic business is frustrating. But frankly, I've never seen anything like this ever happen in sports, where you have the person who is going to bring everybody, the Taylor Swift, the Beyonce, right now the Morgan Wallen, the person who can sell out the stadium, and you don't allow them to perform at all as part of the ensemble cast of women's basketball. And in the process, you put, like, what is Diana Taurasi? Not trying to take a shot at her, but 42. She's had 20 years to make people really care about her and women's basketball, and it hasn't happened. And there are a lot of examples of this. Brittany Griner, who's primarily famous because she broke the law in Russia and we traded the Merchant of Death to get her back. All of this, to me, is an incredible failure. They need a director of common sense. Hell, I would do it. You've got a star who brings more eyeballs than anybody ever has before, and you are completely and totally screwing all of this up. Again, it is utterly indefensible. It is an easy decision to have been made. Caitlin Clark brings tens of millions probably of additional viewers over the course of the women's pursuit of a gold medal. She would make everybody else famous around her more than they ever would have been otherwise, just like Michael Jordan, if you want to make a basketball analogy, or LeBron James, have made a lot of smaller role players really famous. Remember Dellavedova, John Paxson? I mean, these are guys that otherwise would have absolutely no national cachet or recognition, but because of Michael Jordan's star power and LeBron James's star power, they were able to create an opportunity for far more people to care than would have cared before. It frustrates me. It fires me up. And I just don't get it. And I would tie this in, by the way, with just general fear and failure in women's sports in general. Katie Ledecky, did you see this story over the weekend? Katie Ledecky was asked about whether she believed specifically Leah Thomas should be able to compete in women's swimming, and she refused to give an opinion. Katie Ledecky is the best women's swimmer in maybe American history, certainly one of the best ever, currently the best women's swimmer in the world. In a New York Times profile piece, which she requested because she's got a new book coming out. So people out there are like, well, she just doesn't want the attention. No, her PR flack pitched the New York Times on doing a story about her because she has a new book coming out which shares her story and her opinion on many different issues. She refused to take a stand on whether a man should be able to compete in women's swimming. And I just, the cowardice from so many top female athletes who know how ridiculous this is, who understand better than anybody the difference between biology. My goodness, swimming makes it readily apparent. There is even an insult that Katie Ledecky swims like a man. Well, a man would definitely swim like a man, particularly when he's competing in women's sports. She was asked directly about Leah Thomas winning women's championships, and she refused to answer the question. She's worried about backlash. She's worried about sponsor impact. What she's not worried about is telling the truth. And I find that to be shameful in this modern era. I understand if you don't want to say, if you're an athlete and you say like, hey, are you voting for Biden or Trump? And you're like, I just don't want to get into that. But this goes to the very essence of her competition itself. It would be like if a heavyweight boxer was asked whether a flyweight should be able to compete for the heavyweight, or maybe a better analogy to make it is a flyweight boxer was asked whether a heavyweight boxer was able to compete against him. The flyweight would say no. We're different weight classes. That defeats the entire purpose of boxing. If a 12-year-old baseball team suddenly had a 16-year-old playing on it, then every parent in America would revolt, because that's the reason we have age limits. That's the reason we have weight classes. It's the reason why we have a difference between men's and women's sports. And so the idea that you would have a situation where a prominent women's swimmer would be unable and unwilling to answer a question despite begging for attention and begging for a profile piece in the New York Times, I think, frankly, is pathetic. Katie Ledecky knows it's BS. She knows that there's no basis whatsoever for men to be identifying as women and winning women's championships. She's too much of a coward to say it. I think it's pathetic. Shame on her. College World Series, nearly set. I have been loving the drama of all of these games. Every year, I like the women's softball, the women's College World Series, and I like men's College World Series games as well. The catch that was made in center field by Clemson, center fielder, I know they ended up losing in the bottom of the 13th on a walk-off gapper double to the Florida Gators, but it's one of the best catches that I've ever seen. It was Willie Mays-like in terms of the full speed over the head, catching it, and not even catching it cleanly in the glove, but basically cradling the ball against his body on what would have otherwise been a walk-off hit for the Florida Gators. Clemson, though, ends up losing. Congratulations to Florida. Tennessee, if you haven't watched the Tony Vitello press conference, he's Tennessee's baseball coach, right after their win, hit 7 homers against Evansville in a knockout stage game. Tennessee punches its ticket. And then you also dive in. You had Kentucky and a lot of late drama. I was up till after midnight on the East Coast watching this game. The best hitter for Oregon State rips a ball down the line, coming around first base, runs into the Kentucky first baseman, isn't able to then get to second base. Then the next batter comes up, gets struck out. Kentucky to the College World Series for the first time ever in program history. Texas A&M, which has been flirting with excellence for a long time, also in there. And then right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Florida State, UNC, and Virginia are the other 3 teams. We got 3 ACC teams, 4 from the SEC. And also we have the game to be played today between NC State and Georgia for the final spot. So we'll either get a 4th ACC team or a 5th SEC team, which would be an all-time record for the number of SEC teams that have ever made the College World Series. I have been to a game in Omaha before. Years ago, Bobby Bones and I went to go watch the Arkansas Razorbacks, perpetual runner-up, unable to get across the finish line, Arkansas Razorbacks in College World Series. Sorry to bring that up, Razorback fans. If Tennessee advances, then I'm going to make a trip out to Omaha to watch the final round. I'm traveling. I'm going to be down in Atlanta this weekend, taking my kids over Father's Day weekend to watch the Atlanta Braves. I try to take my kids to a Braves series every summer, kind of a Travis family tradition. So I'm going to be down there starting on Saturday, watching 5 games in a row at Truist Park. Can't wait with my family there. And so I won't be able to go to Omaha for the opener. But if Tennessee advances the final, I'm obviously a big Tennessee fan, lifelong. My grandfather played for General Neyland. For the event that some of you guys are out there that are new to this, I'm a donor of Tennessee's athletics funds. So if Tennessee goes to the championship, the best of 3 knockout stage there, then my plan will be to go to Omaha and go watch them. My kids and my wife, because I had the super busy schedule, but they've been to Omaha several times. They're really good friends, and I really like them as well. Tim Corbin and his wife, Maggie, are fantastic people. So we have been – I also root for Vanderbilt baseball because I like Tim Corbin and everything he stands for. So we've been out – they have been out to watch Vanderbilt win a couple of College World Series. Absolutely love it in Omaha. NBA Finals are now basically over, it feels like. The Celtics are just too deep for the Dallas Mavericks. And I think what you're seeing is, in addition to Luka, who's played fairly well, Kyrie Irving didn't play well on his return to Boston. And if Kyrie Irving and Luka don't go off, the Mavs don't have enough firepower to be able to contend with a better balanced Boston Celtics roster. And so this NBA Finals feels over to me. I said I liked the Celtics in 6 before this series began. Maybe now I would say Celtics in 5. I think the Mavs will put everything they've got into Tuesday's game. Into Tuesday's game. I think they'll find a way to get a win there. Then I think the Mavs will lose game 4. Celtics will be up 3-1, come back to Boston and close it out 4-1. I do think, and this went viral over the weekend, we shared it at OutKick and wrote about it, Joel Mazzola, who is the head coach of the Boston Celtics, Jason Kidd is the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. I had not thought about this at all, I'm going to be honest with you. I legitimately had not crossed my thought process. Maybe this is how racist I am. I hadn't thought about the race of the head basketball coaches in the NBA Finals, and I had not thought about what the race of the head basketball coaches in the NBA Finals had been in past years. Legit. Never considered it at all. And so there was a question, and when we cut this into shorter forms, Mazzola was asked about being a black coach in the NBA Finals. Evidently, it's the first time we've had 2 black coaches since 1975. Guys, you can look this up. I don't know what the percentage of black head coaches in the NBA is, because I don't spend a lot of time worried about the racial makeup of people in professions. I just look and see whether or not they do a good job there. I know, crazy, what am I possibly thinking? I know the racial makeup in the NBA is extremely heavy for black, right? Insanely high number of black players relative to particularly the United States population as a whole. Now, I know there's international aspects here, but a lot of the international players are actually white. In fact, the 2 best international white players in the NBA, 2 best white players in the NBA are Luka and Jokic, beyond a shadow of a doubt. The best white American player, it's probably going to be the new guy who's going to go number 1 overall for Duke. He'll probably enter and be the best white American player. I don't even know who the best white American player is. It's a short list. There aren't a lot of good ones. But my point is, I don't even know what the racial makeup is of the overall coaches, but it's around 50%, maybe a little bit over 50%, according to the staff looking it up. So there's a lot of black coaches in the NBA too. Good for them. More power to them. So I don't even know that this is an issue that is remotely worthy of discussion. Does anybody feel like, oh, black people aren't getting a fair shake in the NBA? I think that would be a hard argument to make. But there was a Yahoo Sports reporter who asked Mazzola about it, and Mazzola immediately froze him out and asked, how many Christian head coaches are there? And what I thought was interesting, and then there's a long silence, and we'll play that audio clip when we eventually share a shorter version of this. What I thought was interesting about that is, to me, a lot of athletes and coaches are beginning to reject the identity politics line of questioning, by which I mean, if you decide and believe that this is a huge story and that it is incredibly important, there's 2 black head coaches in the NBA, and Boston is a huge racist city, and the NBA is not progressive enough for you, write that column. But don't try and use the coaches to justify you writing that column. Does that make sense? And I mean, maybe this question in the 1970s would have made sense. If it happened all the way back in 1975, I bet there was no question about it. I would be interested to see the transcript back then. Maybe it's a very valid question then. Civil rights movement has recently occurred. But the fact that it happened all the way ago in 1975, we're sitting here 50 some odd years later nearly, and you're trying to turn that into a story as if black people aren't getting enough opportunities in the NBA. I think it's embarrassing. And again, if you want to write your opinion piece, but don't try to use the coach there to make it an opinion piece. And some people are going to say, well, you guys did that. You asked Dawn Staley. OutKick did. Yeah. The same question Katie Ledecky's asked. It goes to the very essence of competition itself. What do you believe? And so, by the way, Katie Ledecky has said it's hard to compete against previously suspended athletes for doping. So she's against performance-enhancing drugs that allow women to swim faster, but not against biology itself, which is an incredible performance-enhancing drug for men, thanks to testosterone and everything else associated with it. But I just think that's so important. Again, the essence of the sport itself. But I do think Mazzola, in his rejection of that question, and frankly the silence that followed by pointing out Christianity, a lot of people are just deciding on those press conferences to tell you what they think, much less what question they're being asked. And it's somewhat akin to presidential debates or debates in general, where there's a question asked. A lot of times there's a dodge, and the person answers the question they wish they had been asked instead. I think a lot of coaches and athletes are starting to do the same. Big argument recently. Joe Biden, in the wake of Donald Trump getting hit with 34 felonies, said no one is above the law. And this is such a blatant lie. Alvin Bragg is dropping almost every felony charge to a misdemeanor. It's virtually unheard of to raise a misdemeanor to a felony in New York City. In Washington, D.C., they are dropping felony charges like crazy unless you happen to be a Jan 6th member. When you actually look right now at the way that justice is applied, there's zero doubt that there's a two-tier justice system going on. And I'll give you an easy example that's currently occurring. I don't know why we do this, but they are painting a lot of roads in pride colors for the month of June. To me, deciding to paint a road seems in general like a bad idea, since roads are designed to be driven on by cars. But they're actually, in some jurisdictions, trying to prosecute people who put squeal marks on pride flags for hate crimes. They are investigating and trying to arrest and prosecute people who, again, in a car while driving on a road, deface in some way, in the opinion of the people who do this, a pride mural that's painted onto the road. This seems like a bad idea to me in general. I don't know why we put murals on roads that cars are designed to drive over in the first place. Maybe if it's a pedestrian walkway, that's different, whatever. I think this is a strange use of government funds. But prosecuting someone for a hate crime for burning out basically on those flags, and then not prosecuting anyone for defacing the monuments in the vicinity of the of the White House in downtown Washington, D.C., to me is crazy. I mean, it's a clear two-tier justice system. And again, we'll clip this video, but I don't know how many of you watched. I shared it over the weekend. A park police officer, national parks officer, who's trying to stand in front of a statue and protect it while he's having objects thrown at him, while he's being insulted, and while there is daytime graffitiing of those statues going on. To me, it is impossible to argue that when you are trying to put people in prison for hate crimes, for defacing road symbols, and you're actually letting monuments be graffitied in daylight and people be assaulted by having things thrown at them while they stand in front of this group. And this group happened to be anti-Israel, pro-Palestine protesters. And Joe Biden did nothing. And I think this is significant because Biden ran for office claiming that after the rally that he saw in Charlottesville, he was concerned for the soul of America. There are now hundreds of Charlottesvilles, if not thousands, taking place. This one took place where they chanted death to Jews within a few hundred yards of the White House. Biden's doing nothing. So you claim that you ran for president because of the awfulness that you saw in Charlottesville, and now there are hundreds, if not thousands, of far more anti-Semitic rallies taking place, and you have done absolutely nothing to tamp them down, even when they're taking place essentially within a few hundred yards of the White House. No one, to my knowledge, has been arrested for defacing of these monuments. No one has been arrested for assaulting a park police officer by throwing things at him on video in daylight. How in the world is the media not holding Joe Biden responsible for this? To say nothing of the fact that 5 American hostages remain in the control of Hamas. Israel rescued 4 hostages over the weekend. I'm so glad and thankful that those 4 hostages are home. But we got 5 Americans, 100% innocent, did absolutely nothing wrong, snagged by terrorists. Biden hardly ever mentions them. The media hardly ever holds them accountable for their continued captivity. It's just flat out wrong. And it is a failure of the American media that this is not a bigger story. But at a minimum, they should hold Joe Biden accountable for what happened in Charlottesville, for his decision based on what happened in Charlottesville to run for president. And now, effectively, the same thing is happening all over the country. No consequences for anyone. Worse than that, virtually no commentary at all from our commander-in-chief. I'll talk about this on Thursday and Friday. Trump remains a big favorite. It seems quite clear that the Hail Mary attempt to get Trump through lawfare in New York City has had almost no impact. 34 felony counts. We'll see what happens with the sentencing. I continue to believe they're going to try to put Trump in prison because they're desperate and the lawfare is not working. But we will see what ends up happening. Trump is now the biggest gambling favorite that he has been ever in 2024 that I can remember, going head-to-head against Joe Biden. All right, I'll be back on Thursday. Appreciate all of you. Going to go do Harris Faulkner's show. If you want to flip it over to Fox News, I'll be on live there in a couple of minutes. Then I'm going to sit down and do Clay and Buck for 3 hours. And then I'm going to take my 16-year-old, head straight to the airport, and we're going to look at some colleges over the next couple of days. Love all of you. Appreciate all the time you spend hanging out with us at OutKick. I will see you Thursday on this show. I'll see you on Fox News in about 5 minutes, and I'll see you on Clay and Buck in about 25 minutes. Hope you guys are having fantastic Mondays. As always, DBAP, unless you need to SBAP.